Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Welcome, and thanks for tuning into our podcast today. You know, we try to bring to you experts who are very knowledgeable about developments in technology, biotech, artificial intelligence, other technologies to help smooth your pathway to development and success. And I'd like to say that at the end of the discussion with my guest today, I'll ask him to give us some recommendations and observations that I'm hoping he will be able to provide to you that will ease your pathway to further development and success with your particular company. My guest today is Ray Sissons, who's the managing partner of SCX CMC Solutions, which focuses on the important work of being able to take great developments from the laboratory bench out to commercialize and dealing with all the operational steps in between that are so important to bringing products to the market. Ray, thanks for joining us today.
Phil, thank you so much for having me. When we met last year at the BioNJ event, you left a really positive impression on me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, fantastic. Ray, could you tell our audience a little bit about SCX CMC Solutions, what it does, how it helps its clients and companies?
Sure. SCX is a consulting firm that works in the drug product development and supply chain space. This is not my first rodeo. I've been consulting since about 2011, and I've been in the industry since the early 90s. And in this iteration, I've worked with a number of different consultants over the years. And in this iteration of a consulting firm, I really wanted to bring together all the best practices that I have learned over the years with the right group of people, or the group of people that we've brought on board recently in the last 18 months to really help entrepreneurs, biotechs, startup biotechs, early phase biotechs that are getting off the ground, that are dealing with funding, that are trying to forecast budgets, that are making that transition from raising capital to actually executing on their business plan. And so SCX CMC has found a niche in working with those early stage companies, and certainly we grow with them, and we have some late stage development companies as well. But it really is a long-term relationship that we're trying to build. And I really want the people that are working with me as consultants to learn how to be excellent consultants and really provide value for the clients that we serve.
What are the areas that you find that young companies need help in, but may not realize it as they're developing products in the laboratory?
Well, first off, like every startup company, especially right now, the environment is just such that raising capital has just been really, really difficult, really tricky. And hopefully that's going to be changing in the next couple of months. I'm starting to see a couple of indicators, a couple of metrics that are showing that we've probably hit that pivot point. And with a couple of things happening in the market and with the elections coming up, a lot of uncertainty that has been present is going away. And so you'd asked, what are some of the things that we try to provide with those companies that are in the capital raise phase? I really like to sit down with them and say, okay, remember, at the end of the day, the FDA is approving a drug product. They're going to approve a product that's going to be on a shelf, not your business plan, not a stack of clinical data, not your correspondence with the FDA. All of those things are important, but at the end of the day, you need a product. And so I like to have that conversation early on. Now, we call it a target product profile. It's a term that's commonly used in the industry. Let's talk about what this product needs to be, not just at the end, but at various stages along the way. And that way we can come together and devise a drug product development plan in parallel with your clinical development plan. So you'll have your clinical and your drug product development plan. And from that, we can develop a drug product development strategy. And the reason we want to do this early on is because when you're talking to investors, you need to be able to show them that you know the development process and you understand the costs. And it's the costs really that are important up front, right? They want to understand what is not just how much money do I need to ask for, how much money do I need to raise to develop a drug, but also when do I need that fund? When do I need those funds? How much is it going to cost at each stage of development? So early on, I think that's kind of an important message or important conversation to have with a lot of these early startup companies. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. And in my interaction with investigators at Weill Cornell Medical College, I was a mentor there, and at other accelerators, it's uncertainty about the cost of various phases of development that is a really difficult problem for clinical investigators, particularly academics, to deal with, because they don't have the knowledge base that you have in terms of looking at what it costs. I mean, one of the things that surprised me, I found it a little bit appalling actually, is that in doing clinical studies, it can cost $100,000 per patient and more to run a phase 3 clinical study. And if you're talking about thousands of patients, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars in order to do the phase 3, preceded by a big chunk of money to get to where you can file an investigational new drug application with the Food and Drug Administration. Can you speak a little bit about this process? I know it's a very complex process, but the process of getting from the laboratory through the various stages to get to where you can actually file an IND, and where your help kind of helps companies along the way in doing that.
You brought up a couple of interesting points. I want to make sure I don't miss any of them. You talked about the Office of Tech Transfer at universities, and I definitely want to touch on that. And you also talked about getting to the FDA and what their expectations might be. Let me start with that one real quick. I was in a pre-IND meeting very recently, and sadly, it did not go well. We had quite a debate with them, and although we believe that we were well prepared and provide them all the information, I think there were some difficulties in deciding on our dosage form. There were a couple of, let's say, unresolved points that we wanted to bring up and discuss with the agency. And I tried to communicate to the company as like, well, the agency is not there to have a dialogue with you in real time. What they want to do is they want to hear what is your plan, and then they will agree or disagree with it. So in fact, you phrase your questions when you're talking to the agency. We plan to do this, that, X, Y, and Z. Do you agree? Yes or no, right? Then they can decide. The other thing that we sort of learned from that experience was the agency is very clear. They want you to come in with a proposed drug product, an indication, and a population, that indication is directed towards, right? Mm-hmm. So those three things, right? So we can't just go in there and talk about a clinical development plan in the absence of a drug product, right? They want to know, like, what is this drug product you're actually talking about? That's the thing we're going to prove, right? It's going to be a chemical. It's going to be a dosage form. There's going to be a route of administration. Those are the types of things that we definitely have to think through. And in working with many of these biotech startup companies, the well-organized ones will have somebody on the drug product development side within the company, or if not, they will find knowledgeable consultants to help them. Because I guess, not to make too much of a generalization, but a lot of these clinical therapies are developed by physicians, right? Mm-hmm. They're on the front lines working with the patients, and they have an idea of what their clinical plan is going to be, what they want to do to demonstrate efficacy, et cetera. Right. But they might not have as much information on the industrial pharmacy, on the drug product development side. And that's where we try to come in. I did want to come back to your other point about working with academia, because we were recently working with an Office of Tech Transfer at a local university here, and they just kept telling us, go read the paper. All the information's in the paper. And I was like, that is not a tech transfer. I cannot recreate what you did. And I'm not a competing lab. You're like, we're supposed to be working together. You're like, this is what a protocol looks like. This is the information you need to give us. This is the format. I need to understand your supply chain. Who are your suppliers? What kind of documentation you have. So academia works just very differently than industry. And there's no, up or down about that. It's just like we're in a different place. We serve different masters. And when we get to drug product development, in a regulated environment, it's a very different or a different set of requirements and constraints. And that's something that we try to convey to our partners. And it's fun to have these conversations. And we always come to a reasonable conclusion. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure you have a lot of stories to tell yourself.
Well, yeah, since I'm on the board with the Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, I get to interact with quite a few academicians, brilliant researchers. And I always chuckle a little bit when I ask them, well, how big is the market for this potential technology? You say, well, it's immense. And then, well, what industry might it be applicable? Well, it's applicable to all industries. And, businesses should be beating a pathway to our door. And it's the lack of realization in academic circles of all the work that has to go into taking that paper that you referred to, Ray, and actually operationalizing it in a way that allows you to create a reliable, sustainable, repeatable drug product that you can then start to use in testing. And you did mention the supply chain and where you get your materials. It's one thing to get enough material that's reliable to do some bench tests in a lab. It's quite another thing to get enough material from a reliable supplier if you're going to provide clinical supplies for thousands of patients, or if you're successful, a worldwide supply. And so understanding that early on, I think helps the companies that you are helping understand that there's a lot more to drug development than great science. It's also great operations as well.
You used a really great term in there, operationalize. That is a hardcore supply chain term. And I appreciate that because, over time, I have come to realize, and it was one of the things that I really wanted to embed in our mindset at SCX, is that supply chain is not CMC, right? Chemistry, manufacturing controls, and drug product is a very different skill set than doing operations, logistics, supply chain, etc. Right? Your typical PhD head of CMC is not going to have a lot of background in negotiating master supply agreements, and certainly not negotiating supply agreements, commercial supply agreements, or working with pharmaceutical boards, or getting licensing in different states. Those are very different things than being able to manipulate proteins in a dosage form, or manipulate a PK profile, with formulation design. So in that, it's important, as you're starting to think about, developing a product, to, at some point, at the appropriate moment, begin to specialize, and differentiate between different functions, right? We already understand that that clinical development, clinical operations is a different function than regulatory, is a different function than drug product development or CMC, right? So that's that's where it starts. But as your company grows, then you have to begin bringing in other functionalities, such as supply chain, such as finance, or finance and accounting, or compliance. So yeah, your organizational structure changes and grows as the company grows. But of course, you got to start lean. And of course, as a founder, you're going to be wearing a lot of hats, and you're going to be doing everything, and you're going to be outside of your comfort zone, obviously, right? One of the things that I enjoyed about consulting is kind of one of the reasons why I left Big Pharma, is because at Big Pharma, I had one project for like 3 or 4 years. It was almost like doing a PhD. And then I moved to generics. I had 4 projects simultaneously. And I was like, wow, this is really good because when I get bored with one, I can start another. When I learn something from another, then I can apply it to the other projects.
Right.
And, moving from like a generic company to a CDMO, and now I'm working with not just products, but other companies, all these different companies. You get this wonderful periscope view into how every different company operates, the personalities that are involved, the mission, vision, and values of each company, how they operate. And then moving into consulting was very much the same thing. You get a seat at the table at all these various companies that are in different stages of their business cycle, going after different indications, different modalities. And it's incredible, to witness, and it keeps you mentally very flexible, right? You just have to be open-minded about many of these things so you can begin to continue to absorb all these, I guess, what do they call paradigm shifts as they happen over time.
All right. Well, let me hold you there, Ray, and I will ask you a question about teamwork, because you're focusing on one of the key success factors, in my view, for smaller companies. I just want to take a minute to talk a little bit about and introduce our viewers to Crowley Law. We're a boutique law firm that is focused on helping innovators in the life sciences and other technologies realize their dreams, to take great ideas from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside in the life sciences, or from the garage to the marketplace in other technologies to enrich the lives of thousands or even millions of people. I'm a former research physicist who decided that it was just taking too long to get things out of my lab. I was dealing with superconductivity to help people, and switched over to a legal career where I have this wonderful opportunity to work with people like many of you, brilliant, dedicated, passionate people about creating products and services that use technologies to improve people's lives. And so we have a group of very experienced lawyers who are also passionate about developing technology and provide what we like to feel is big firm experience with the kind of care and attention that only a small boutique firm can provide. So please check us out at Crowley Law LLC.com. We have a whole host of resources for your use, free resources for your use that deal with issues that are relevant to technology-based businesses and businesses generally. And we're happy to have you use them. If you have questions, please contact us. You can contact us from the website. We're here to help. All right, Ray, I want to get back to you. And, you raised an issue that I did point out in the free ebook that I have on my website. It's called The Top 10 Causes of Failure for Technology Startups and How to Avoid Them. One of those is not having a multifunctional team. And I think that you described very well the necessity to bring in and be aware of issues so that people don't try to develop a product with a substantial blind spot where they haven't really thought through a key aspect of the development process, which, as you pointed out, is very different from the discovery process. There are very many more steps involved and manufacturing type issues, particularly when you're dealing with fragile proteins. What have been some of the key mistakes that you have helped your clients avoid?
Yeah, that's a great point. First of all, on the question of teamwork, I think that yes, team as like a multifunctional team, and ensuring that you're covering all the bases that are appropriate for your project at the stage that it is currently. And so doing that gap analysis with the clients is really helpful, right? And so number one thing that we can help avoid mistakes is if we can identify gaps early on. Here's an example. You're going into a clinical trial. You've got a great group of PhDs that have developed the drug, have worked with the drug substance or the bulk drug manufacturer, and you've developed a formulation, and now you're getting ready to go to the clinic. But how much experience do they have in labeling regulations, labeling in different countries? So clinical labeling, packaging, and clinical operations is a very different skill set, and might not reside in your CMC group, and it might not reside in your clinical team. It's just it's always one of those things that a small company has to address and solve, in a manner that's fit for purpose for their product. Like, how are they going to get the drug from the manufacturer to the clinic in the proper packaging with the proper labeling that meets all the regulatory requirements, right? And so that's an area that I think that a lot of people overlook, and then they begin pulling people out of their comfort, out of their core competencies, into the world of clinical packaging, into the world of clinical supplies logistics, into the world of IRT, and it's it's a steep learning curve, and it can be addressed in a very cost-effective way if you've got the right people and the right skill sets to help bridge that gap. So that's one example.
Well, it sounds as if it's useful to be open to bringing in appropriate outside consultants in areas that the company's not expert in. And I suppose that one of the key questions for the founders and the leadership of the company is trying to figure out who those leaders are. I mean, what are the factors that people should, that developers of drugs should consider when looking for appropriate consultants to help them, before they need somebody full time doing a particular action? What are the kind of key success factors for finding the right kind of consultants?
Finding the right consultant is no different than finding the right development partner, the right CDMO, the right CRO, etc. I'm always surprised at how careful people can be when they buy a car, how much research they do, versus I need a consultant. I'll call Phil. Maybe he knows somebody, and just going out like blind referral in that manner, word of mouth, as opposed to just saying do the same amount of due diligence, get background, come up with a plan of what you actually need, right? Be very clear about what you need. Be clear about what your selection criteria are going to be, and stick to it. And then give everybody the same information. I am looking for X to do Y and provide deliverables by this date. All right. So everybody gets to bid or gets to present on the same set of information. Right. So, finding consulting, as I said, is no different than selecting a CDMO or a CRO. There has to be a business process or a process in place. And it helps if you've got expertise in the area. But I think in the absence of that, having a process really helps, right? A methodical, formal process that you can defend before your investors, before your other teammates, your colleagues at the company. You say I went out, I got X number of resumes, I interviewed these people with the idea that I was looking for very specific things. And it's okay to learn along the way, but then you just sort of have to backtrack and say okay, now I have a fuller picture where we just have, several informal conversation. Now I have, let's start over with what exactly I believe that I need at this point, and see who's best equipped, best suited, to provide that solution. Now at SCX, I like when it comes to consultants, I have a philosophy that there's never one person that can do everything. Like this idea, I can hire one consultant for X dollars an hour or for whatever, and I'm going to have them do everything under the sun related to drug product development. That's asking a lot. And you get a lot more mileage, and I can provide much better solutions if you allow me to put a team together. Let's say 3 or 4 consultants, and they don't have to be overlapping, and they don't all do the same job, but it's basically the same as having one person, except you get experts in various fields.
It reminds me, Ray, of the statement that I've heard in quality circles: if you don't take the time and resources to do it right the first time, where are you going to find the time and the resources to do it again?
Yeah, that's very true. And so finding the right people and surrounding yourself with with really good people. And that's another thing maybe we could touch on too is leadership. If you're a founder, a lot of times it's like, yes, I've got this great idea, but you do have to inspire other people. You do have to get them to align with your vision, right? You do need to synergize your mindsets so that you're all sort of pointing in the right direction, all working towards the same goal, even if some of them are consultants. They need to understand your work style, how you operate, and you need to be very clear about what your goals are and what expectations are of them.
All right. I mean, we've seen a lot of changes in the biotech business over the past 5, 10, 20 years from people who tried to create fully integrated pharmaceutical companies. I think Amgen was the last one to actually navigate, one of the last to navigate that process, although there have been others. But there seems to be a tendency to at least start out as virtual companies and to delegate out to consultants like you, like your company and others, some of these key areas where the founders don't have expertise. And it seems to me from a corporate governance standpoint, it really makes sense to try to recruit as directors individuals who have had experience in drug development so that they can ask management the questions that they may not be sensitive to in the process of developing their plan. So we've seen a lot of changes, a lot of work in that area. If you had a crystal ball, Ray, what would you say are the likely changes in the biotech and biotech development area over the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm actually really optimistic about the next 5 to 10 years. First off, we're now, let's call it post-COVID, and we're sort of crawling out of that, that era into something different. And that something different is a world where here in the US, there's a real big push to onshore and bring a lot of these resources back to the US, a lot of supply chain resources. And so if you're a biotech company, a startup virtual company, and you're outsourcing, I think you're going to have a lot more choice in who you can work with. CDMO, the contract manufacturing and development space, has always been fragmented. It's not a high barrier to entry for anybody to buy some equipment, fix up a facility, and begin doing, let's say, bench work, like your garage level type work, non-GMP work. And then you eventually move into your, into GMP and then, pilot scale manufacturing, et cetera. It's not hard to do. So there's a lot of folks that come in and do it, and a lot of skilled people coming out of industry that are like, well, what do I do next? Maybe I'll start a lab, and it moves forward from there. And so with this push to onshore supply chain, I think there's going to be a lot more choices, which also brings the complication of now you got to weed through all the different choices to find the right partner. But that's just it. It's like you want to find the partner that's going to really value your business, right? Really hold you as you're a core part of our company and what we need to do to be successful on our side. How do we how do we help you be successful, right? Which is different than take a number, get in line, or I'm going to offshore this, to 17 time zones away. And hopefully, I'll throw it over the fence and in the morning it'll come back and it'll be done. So there's, it's a shift in mindset that way. But I think that trend is going to continue onshoring and having hopefully in your own backyard. If you're starting in Philadelphia, great. There's, there's a growing number of CDMOs in this area that can help you with cell and gene therapies that are, with the traditional solid oral dosage forms, et cetera, and a wealth of knowledge in this area. Same thing in Boston, same thing out west in San Francisco. So, that's just kind of a starting point of where I see the industry heading. And as companies are, beginning to get funding, they need to see, they need to deploy those funds to develop the product and progress the projects.
Well, Ray, do you have a few, 1 to 3 recommendations that you can give to aspiring innovators in the biotech and pharma space for things to do or things to avoid in order to help smooth their pathway to developing commercializable products?
Oh man, it's going to be so tailor-made for every person. I'm an engineer, so like I have a certain mindset when I approach things. So like as an engineer, like and starting a company, and so starting a consulting company in a lot of ways is like starting any company. You need a strong back office. You need business processes. You need to build the infrastructure to run a company. You know, like the day-to-day blocking and tackling. Before we got on this call, I was with my bookkeeper. We were going through all the finances and trying to figure out how to categorize certain types of expenses. But you got to do it, right? And so, like as an engineer, like I said, develop a process for pretty much everything, right? It creates discipline and muscle memory. So when you go to do something, let's say vendor selection, you already know, you've already internalized the process. So you know, okay, I need this information. It goes from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, a formal process. So that helps. And then I think I mentioned before, understand if you're starting a company, you are the leader. People are looking to you for leadership. I've seen a lot of smaller startup biotech companies. It's sort of like an outgrowth of their research. And yes, that's important, but there's a certain type of energy in leadership that's kind of required in order to engage and influence other people. And because look, you're now, yes, you might have been technically really astute, brilliant, but now you have to raise money, right? And every entrepreneur is going to have to go out at some point and raise money or write grants, etc. And you need to engage with people in the language that they're used to hearing, right? In a community where they see certain traits as being valuable. So that's another thing. It's like understand you're a leader and work on it. Build your leadership skills. I think that's really important. I just heard from one of my other colleagues that is an executive in Boston. It's like there's no really, it's hard to find good executives these days. That like for investors, that's worth the weight in gold. Somebody who's already had experience and success. We all know that. We recognize them. We know who they are. But yeah, we can't afford them. Right. It's like, so how do you educate and bring up the next generation of leaders and continue to foster an environment where people want to do this and see the value in doing it? And, like any great leader, it's not you and not only you, it's the people you surround yourself with and your ability to extract greatness from them. Like, how can I get the best out of this? How can we get the best out of this conversation? How can we work together to get to discover what we're really good at that we might not have known it? My business partner is coming out of Vertex, and he's really strong in continuous manufacturing and very intellectually, very curious. Mm-hmm. What he doesn't realize, what I'm pulling out of him, he's a fantastic salesman. He is really great at generating new business. And I was like, I came in this, I've got a background in sales, and I was like, hey, I'm going to be doing all the business development. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm like, I'll do contracts. You go out there. He's in Boston. He's, in the middle of, all these startup companies in a fantastic community, and he loves doing it. And it's a very natural thing. So, I'm prepared to give up or to cede certain responsibilities to those that obviously clearly do it better than I do.
Well, right? kind of giving up one of your hats and the willingness to do that. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, Ray. The time has just flown by. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise. I hope that our viewers find many nuggets in our discussion today to apply to their own business. Please remember that Crowley Law is here to help, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. And again, Ray, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you very much. I had a really fun time.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, leave a positive review, and share with others.